Okay, we are live.
All right. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamu alaikum, everybody, and welcome to our Ramadan series with Br.Abdurrahman. Just a couple of housekeeping items before we get started. Please keep your mics on mute, and if you have any questions, please use the chat box option or text myself or Rida with any questions, and we can address them at the end. That being said, I'd like to go ahead and introduce our speaker, Br.Abdurrahman. Br.Abdurrahman is a writer, translator, and library employee based in Columbus. He attended youth events in Noor from its initial construction and has had many great memories made there. Solidarity among Muslims and people of all backgrounds is important to him, as is passing the baton from generation to generation so that every student can become a capable teacher. And again, Jazakallah khair, Br.Abdurrahman, and the floor is yours.
وإياك بسم الله والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله أما بعد رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقهوا قولي. O Allah, relieve my chest of pressure, make easy my affairs, and unfasten the knot in my tongue that they may understand my speech. So the topic I chose for today's Halaqa was a prophetic Ramadan. I chose this topic because, it's something that I've been thinking about in my own personal Ramadan experience. And it relates to a topic that I've been coming back to over and over again, which is the psychology and the thinking of the Prophet ﷺ, and how to use that to enhance my Islam and enhance my relationship with Allah Azza wa Jal. So I'll begin with the famous hadith that we all know, which is that the Prophet ﷺ was, when Ramadan approached, more generous than the wind unrestrained, bringing rain and life. And he was generous at all times, but he was the most generous when Ramadan began. And being generous is not just, of course, about money. We all know the hadith that your smile on the face of your brother or sister is a form of charity. And it's about these kind of social connections that make Islam holistic and not just a one-dimensional obsession over any particular topic or other. And when you think of it that way, Islam becomes a complex, interconnected web about life. It's about living your life in a Muslim environment and a non-Muslim environment, with Ahl al-Kitab, with people that are not Ahl al-Kitab, with family, with strangers, with travelers, with the orphan, any kind of person. That's who you're dealing with, and that's who you are expected to be generous to. With that large of a task, I find myself often daunted by the immensity of that task. It's a very large, complex task. And Ramadan is a perfect time to seek refuge in worship. Every time is a good time, but Ramadan is the perfect time to seek refuge in worship, and to regroup and to marshal your thoughts and recharge from the challenges of the year past and from the challenges that are coming ahead. And prayer in particular is a relief and a refuge that is perfect for that kind of recharging. And it should be a relief. And when I find myself bothered by prayer or put upon by prayer, I feel as if prayer is an obligation. I have to remind myself to recalibrate my thinking and to reapproach it, because it's not merely an obligation. It is an obligation, but it also is a pleasure to carry out, and a way to get closer to Allah Azza wa Jal, and to feel like a better person. And with prayer and worship, there is an emphasis on moderation and gradation. So you don't want to, in Ramadan in particular, you don't want to attempt something that you aren't used to, because you have to graduate from stage to stage, right? And it's rare that one can leap directly from one stage to another several levels above. You might succeed in doing that, but you might also relapse and foil your hopes and dash your hopes and cause a kind of lack of confidence. So that's a lesson that the Prophet ﷺ himself gave to his Sahaba. Not to say that you shouldn't challenge yourself. You should challenge yourself. And not to say that many Sahaba didn't challenge themselves immensely. But the Prophet made clear to them that you should do this challenging of yourself through love of Allah Azza wa Jal, and not through, it should be organic and it should be natural. It should not be takalluf, I'm blanking on the English word for takalluf, but a kind of exaggeration in effort. So one time the Prophet ﷺ came and saw a woman that had tied a rope in the masjid, and she would lean on it when she was praying at night. And he ﷺ said that, you should not do this. If you feel tired, you should go to bed and sleep, because it is not important for Allah that you torture yourself by lack of sleep or sleep deprivation. It is important to Allah Azza wa Jal that you worship Him out of energy and out of nashat, out of enthusiasm. And there's another hadith, or there's actually why when I was thinking of the topic for this talk, what I recalled as a hadith, but in researching it, I found out that it was not in fact a hadith. It is in fact a saying by one of the Salaf as-Salih. And this saying is, al-munbita la ardan qata' wa la dhahran abqa. That the person who attempts to accomplish too much does not cover the distance that he wants to cover, and does not spare his back, and does not spare the back, more importantly, of his ride. So this is the Arabs, being obviously a Bedouin people, it's concerned with camels and beasts of burden. So if somebody is trying to travel from one city to another and they go too fast, they won't reach their destination. They will just exhaust their ride and possibly damage it, and they'll never get to where they're trying to get. This is a saying from the Tabi'een, and there's a hadith with a similar meaning, and it is narrated by Jabir radiallahu anh, and in this hadith the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam says, "Inna hada ad-din mateen, فأوغل فيه برفق ولا تبغض إلى نفسك عبادة الله فإن المنبت لا أرضا قطع ولا ظهرا أبقى." And it's very similar phrasing, but it means that this deen of Islam is a challenging affair. It is a weighty affair. Obviously, the basics of Islam are easy because Islam is not a religion of hardship. But if you want to graduate to the higher levels of Iman and Ihsan, then it is a very weighty and difficult affair. فأوغل فيه برفق. So deepen your experience of it with gentleness, and don't try to do too much all at once. And ولا تبغض إلى نفسك عبادة الله. And don't make the worship of Allah hateful to yourself by not understanding the core of it. If you try to perform the motions without understanding the heart of the worship, it doesn't matter how many rak'at you'll be praying, because you won't be getting any closer to the goal. So you have to evolve your worship based upon the evolution in your closeness to Allah Azza wa Jalla, and in your understanding of Islam with your heart as well as your mind. And this is not a call to complacency. I'm aware of how this can be misconstrued. I'm not saying that you shouldn't challenge yourself. You should. But it's a call to bring our hearts and minds in alignment with our actions and appearance. It's all about intention, and you don't want to be that person that forces on themselves all of these actions, and one day wakes up and says, "Why am I doing this? I'm doing all these actions and I don't know why I'm doing them." That's what a'yadhu billah, not a scenario that we want to put ourselves in. And starting small and building big, the best is the little which lasts. And we know the hadith of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, when he said that which is little and is continuous is better than that which is a lot and is cut off. With that being said, it's not about being hard on yourself. It's about being devoted to your Creator, right? And that's in general what Islam is about. And I also come back to this idea over and over again, which is the idea of Tawheed. That's what Islam is about. Tawheed and complete devotion to Allah Azza wa Jal. Islam is not about being against the world or against yourself. It's not about lamenting or lamenting what has passed and your wasting of good opportunities. We recently passed the 10th night of Ramadan, and we all go through these cycles, or maybe I go through this cycle of maybe I'm behind on one goal and already a third of Ramadan has passed. So we don't want to have that lamentation and that self recrimination that makes us feel guilty. We want to take a positive approach to it. So Islam is not about being against the world or against yourself. It's about serving the creator of the world and serving your creator. It's about being devoted to the one that created you. And that goes a lifelong process, and we have to mold our current opinions to fit what Allah has ordained. There are many areas in which, with our modern sensibilities, we often have to pull back and recalibrate and say, what's right is what Allah Azza wa Jal has written for us and commanded us. And we have to align our own desires with what Allah has said. And there's also many areas where Islam is a map to how we can address the modern world. So Islam is not stuck in the medieval Arab world. It is a religion for all times and for all scenarios. So we have to be aware of the breadth and the flexibility of Islam in a way that can respond to our own changing needs, spiritual needs and worldly needs, and in light of where we're living, because obviously everything that we do is connected to where we're living and the society that we're in today. And there are many events that have happened recently and that have been going on for longer, but we have to have a role to play in that. And Ramadan is also about being charitable with our time and our efforts with matters of justice for all people, as we need to be witnesses for Allah Azza wa Jal, and we need to be people that call to the straight path. So this Ramadan, inshallah, can be a start to your personal contribution to this process. And to conclude, I'm going to mention some narrations of the Prophet ﷺ that I thought were particularly good reminders. So there's another expression which goes, al-imanu ma waqara fil qalbi wa saddaqahu al-amal. That faith is that which has settled into the heart and which is borne out by deeds. So your faith has to settle in your heart and be proven by your deeds. Of course, we know that none of us can enter paradise by our deeds. None of us can enter Jannah by our deeds. But we have to show Allah Azza wa Jal from ourselves good, as the Prophet ﷺ used to say, Arullaha min anfusikum khayra. There is a hadith narrated by Abi Umama radiallahu anhu, who said that that the Prophet ﷺ said, من أعطى الله من أعطى لله ومنع لله وأحب لله وأبغض لله فقد استكمل الإيمان. Whoever gives for Allah and refrains for Allah, so gives and refrains for Allah, and loves for Allah and hates for Allah, then he has completed Iman. And obviously there's a point of clarification there that this hate or dislike for Allah Azza wa Jal, you must never confuse that for your own personal grudges and your own personal animus, right? We all sometimes love to deceive ourselves and say, I dislike this person because they're not a good person. And sometimes it might be a personal reason that we cloak in this cover of piety or of righteousness. عن ربيعة بن كعب الأسلمي رضي الله عنه قال كنت أبيت مع رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم فأتيته بوضوئه وحاجته. So this Sahabi radiallahu anhu, who is called Rabi'ah ibn Ka'b al-Aslami, mentions that I was living with the Prophet. He happened to be staying with the Prophet at a certain time, and he gave him his water for wudu. And the Prophet then told him, Sal, a simple one-word request. He said, he told Rabi'ah, ask me whatever you want in one word, Sal. فقلت أسألك مرافقتك في الجنة. He said, I ask you, O Prophet of Allah, to be with you in Jannah. That was the first thing that came to mind and the first thing he asked. He was smart enough to know his best interest. And the Prophet says, أو غير ذلك. And the Prophet told him, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, anything besides that. And Rabi'ah says, هو ذاك. That's it. And the Prophet then responds, فَأَعِنِّي عَلَى نَفْسِكَ بِكَثْرَةِ السُّجُودِ. And the Prophet tells him, help me to enter you into the highest level of paradise with me, with much sujood. Carry out many prayers, and to help me help you attain the highest level of Firdaus. And this is narrated in Muslim. And another hadith narrated by Abi Dharr, جندب بن جنادة رضي الله عنه ومعاذ بن جبل رضي الله عنهما عن رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم قال اتق الله حيثما كنت وأتبع السيئة الحسنة تمحها وخالق الناس بخلق حسن. And this is a famous hadith. And the reason I mention it is for the core part of the hadith, the middle part. وَأَتْبِعَ السَّيِّئَةَ الْحَسَنَةَ تَمْحُهَا. So the hadith goes, be aware of Allah. اتَّقِ اللَّهَ حَيْثُمَا كُنْتَ, wherever you are. وَأَتْبِعَ السَّيِّئَةَ الْحَسَنَةَ تَمْحُهَا. And follow the bad deed, the mistakes that you commit, with a good deed, and you will wipe them away, and you will blot them out. وَخَالِقِ النَّاسَ بِخُلُقٍ حَسَنٍ. And always treat people with good manners, no matter if they're an enemy or if they're somebody that is a stranger or a loved one or whoever they may be. Treat the الناس in general, people in general, with good manners. رواه الترمذي. The final hadith, and then I'll if there's any room for questions, I don't know if we have any, but the final hadith is narrated by Ubadah ibn Samit radiallahu anhu, who said that the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, في الجنة 100 درجة ما بين كل درجتين كما بين السماء والأرض. In heaven, in paradise, in Jannah, there is 100 levels, and between every level and the next is the same distance that is between the heavens and the earth, so a massive distance. وَالْفِرْدَوْسُ أَعْلَاهَا, and the Firdaus is the highest level of these levels. وَمِنْهَا تُفَجَّرُ أَنْهَارُ الْجَنَّةِ الْأَرْبَعَةِ, and from the Firdaus spring the 4 rivers of Jannah. وَمِنْ فَوْقِهَا يَكُونُ الْعَرْشِ فَإِذَا سَأَلْتُمُ اللَّهَ فَاسْأَلُوهُ الْفِرْدَوْسِ. And in this Firdaus is where Allah Azza wa Jal has his throne. So if you ask Allah, then ask him for the Firdaus al-A'la of Jannah. And these last hadith that I mentioned, the 4 that I just read right now, are just to show you, number one, how everything that you do should be for Allah. Man a'ta lillahi wa mana'a lillahi wa ahabba lillahi wa abghada lillahi. Everything that you do, whether it's love or hate or giving or refraining, should be for Allah. And how our priority in this life should be, like the Sahabi that we heard about, Rabi'ah, should be getting closer to Allah Azza wa Jal and to His Prophet. And how we should be aware of Allah wherever we are, and not despair when we commit bad deeds, but rather wipe them out with good deeds. And when we ask Allah Azza wa Jal, we should ask Him for the best. And we should not be timid in our dua. We should not say, oh Allah, forgive me, inshallah, or if you wish. Number one, that doesn't really make sense. If you're talking to Allah, you shouldn't refer to Him in the third person. But number two, when you ask Allah for a dua, you should be firm, and you should be clear, and you should not hesitate to ask for the best. Don't say, oh Allah, please just enter me into the lowest level of Jannah, because that's what I deserve, or better than what I deserve. So just forgive me my sins and don't put me in hellfire. Ask Allah for safety from hellfire, but also ask Him, as the Prophet ﷺ told us, ask Him for the highest level of Jannah, al-Firdaus al-A'la, because Allah is as you think of Him, and if you think of Allah merciful and generous, then He will be so with you. We ask Allah to make us among those who call upon Him in sincerity and who expect the best of Him. And I don't know if we have any questions yet. If we don't, we can have a discussion maybe, but let me know.
Jazakallah khair, Brother Abdurrahman. I am looking at the chat. I don't see any questions. And also looking at the YouTube page right now. So I don't see any questions right now. But again, really appreciate your words of wisdom, and thank you for providing with us with those words of wisdom. I really liked your last point, especially with asking Allah for the best. I think sometimes we kind of, as human beings, are afraid to or hesitant to say, ask for the best, or think we don't deserve the best. But like you said, is as we think, is who we think. So, and I really like that last point that you honed in on, as asking for the best doesn't make you, greedy or anything like that. You should always ask for the best, inshallah. So,
inshallah.
But yeah, again, I don't see any questions. I think that being said, should be all good, inshallah. I really appreciate it, and thank you again for taking time, and for joining, and inshallah we look forward to seeing you all